Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 9th of November of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And of course the most important piece of news is the conversation that took place between the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, between the current President of Ukraine, Zelensky, and also the Elon Musk, the businessman from the United States of America, Elon Musk, was also involved in that conversation. And telling the truth, this is the most exciting and the most interesting detail that I would like to discuss with you in details during the first part of the video. First of all, let's discuss once again the Trump's plan, the plan of Trump team, and understand whether this plan can survive, whether this plan can fit the Putin's and Russia requirements. First of all, according to this plan, the United States of America wants to create 800 miles demilitarized zone. And according to this plan and according to Trump, these territories should be occupied or taken under control by the forces of the United Kingdom and European Union forces. So according to the plan, neither NATO or United States forces are going to take part in the controlling of this territory, which is obviously nonsense, because this is the first thing that doesn't have anything common with the reality that currently lives in Russia's understanding of the situation. Because first of all, Russia will never accept the presence of the Western countries and the forces of the Western countries along the border with Russia, despite the fact that these forces are not the forces of NATO. The second thing is, according to Trump, Russia will get the territories that is currently under complete Russian control. We're talking about the Crimea, Kherson, Zaporozhye, DPR, and LPR. Every single square kilometer that is colored in red will stay under complete Russian control, and most likely these territories would be recognized by the Western countries and Western community. As for this paragraph, maybe this is something that can fit the Russian requirements, but also not for 100%. And the most important thing is that according to this plan, the talks and the conversations and discussions about the integration into NATO by Ukraine will be stopped for 20 years. So what does it mean? We can read this a little bit different way. That means that Ukraine will join NATO in 20 years. Not like it will be stopped forever, but in 20 years, Ukraine will join NATO. And now the Western countries and Trump personally gives the Russians 20 years to prepare themselves, to prepare infrastructure before inevitable thing. Ukraine joins NATO. So it's like something like a time Russia can use to prepare infrastructure, to prepare defense or whatever they like before NATO comes closer to Moscow, to the capital of Russian Federation. And obviously everybody understands that this is also something that Russia will never accept. Of course, we can talk just about the plan of Trump, but I would like to remind you the latest the latest peace proposal that was made by the President of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. And to do this, first of all, let's turn on the territories that, according to Russia, Ukraine should leave if they want to sign a peace agreement with Russia and if they want to finish the war. As you can see, we have added these black territories on map, and these are the territories that, according to Putin's peace plan, Ukrainians need to abandon. We're talking about the rest of Kherson area, so these territories the Ukrainians should abandon. We're talking about the Zaporozhye region. Furthermore, Ukrainians should abandon not just the territory and fields, but also the capital of this region, the city of Zaporozhye. Also, the Ukrainians should abandon the territories of Donetsk People Republic. We're talking about the cities like Pokrovsk, Konstantinovka, Slaviansk, Kramatorsk, and of course the city of Siversk. And we are talking about a very small part of LPR, Lugansk People Republic. There are just several villages like Novolyubovka, Grekovka, just maybe 3, Novoigorovka, and that's it. Probably 4 villages left for the Russians to take this territory under complete control. So this is the first thing, and as you can see, there is a very big gap between the proposal of Trump and the things that Putin needs. We see that the Russians want to take the significant territories under control without any clashes, without any fightings, including, which is the most important, the city of Zaporozhye and the city city of Kherson that are currently located already on the Ukrainian side of the Dnipro River. If anything goes wrong, the Russians will always have possibilities to begin their offensive from this foothold further in the western direction, in the direction of Odessa and in the direction of the border with Poland, because this is already very perfect positions on the Ukrainian side or bank of the river. So this is the first difference. Another important thing is about the NATO integration. The Trump says that Ukraine will integrate into NATO in 20 years. As for Putin's proposal, Ukraine will never become a part of NATO, and Ukraine will save their neutral status. And this is very important. This is a very important difference because everybody understands. I don't think you need to explain. You have some explanations about this. And another important thing that NATO, according to Putin, there should be no forces on the ground on the territory of Ukraine. Furthermore, according to the Putin's plan, the number of forces of Ukraine should be limited. And according to this plan, Ukraine should have not more than 30,000 soldiers. That's it. But when talking about deployment of the Western forces on the territory of the line of combat contact to this demilitarized zone, obviously these two paragraphs and these two things completely opposite to each other. And the most important, according to the Trump plan, this plan doesn't resolve one important issue, one important question that was raised by Putin: the nationality. The Russian language should become the second language in country, and Ukraine shouldn't restrict or do any damage to Russian culture and people who speaks Russian on the territory of Ukraine. And as you can see, according to Trump's plan, this paragraph wasn't even discussed. Now let's talk about the details. You know that it is very interesting, the discussion between, we can understand why Zelensky and Trump were talking about this, because Trump first should have, let's say, should have announced this plan to Zelensky to clarify with him details and to tell him what is going to happen next if Zelensky refused to follow this plan. And most likely the conversation was about complete absence of any support and supply of Ukraine in the special military operation. Zelensky understood everything, and I believe Zelensky didn't have anything to show opposite to this plan. The most important thing, according to my understanding of the situation, why Donald Trump decided to involve the American businessman Elon Musk in this conversation. The thing is that Elon Musk currently has the biggest group of forces, intelligence forces that know and see everything that is currently happening on the surface of the earth. So Elon Musk knows for sure exactly where exactly the Russian bases are located. Elon Musk knows for sure how many missiles the Russians have, how many trains, how many military bases, how many military factories the Russia has, because all these things can be easily seen from the satellites. And using satellite and some methods of analytics of information, you can understand where exactly the Russians concentrated their warehouses, what is Russian logistic, and probably that was the main reason why in the conversation between Zelensky and Trump, Elon Musk was involved, because he provided the special opinion about the current things on the territory of Russian Federation and in Russia itself. And probably the things that Elon Musk provided to both Trump and Zelensky was enough for Trump to make a certain conclusion and to make his proposal, which is completely doesn't fit the Russian requirements. Okay, of course, let's wait what is going to be next. We see that Trump made his first step. Now we are waiting for some steps, certain steps from Russian Federation and from Putin himself. But obviously this is going to be a very cold war, very hot war, which obviously is going to be have the title of the second Cold War in the future. Now let's talk about the situation on the ground, and first let's discuss the situation and what is happening right now in the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. And according to information we have, according to different mappers, mainly pro-Ukrainian mappers and neutral mappers, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their positions and to take under control additional true line in the direction to the village of Sukhe Yale from the village of Maximovka. Furthermore, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the direction of Konstantinovka also through the field. So these are the changes on the ground in comparison between the 9th and the 8th of November. In the direction of Bogoyavlenka, the Russians also improved their positions and got a little bit closer in the direction of Veselogay. So now the Russians, according to this progress that we can see during the previous 24 hours, are not going to attack the village itself and the villages along the river of Sukhiye Yali. The only thing the Russians are trying to do is to shorten the distance between the villages along the river of Sukhiye Yali. We're talking about these several villages and the Russian positions. They want to shorten the lines, they want to shorten the distance and to establish complete FPV drone, mortar and artillery control over the main supply roads that currently the Ukrainians are using. So the Russians are trying to collapse the Ukrainian logistic, to defeat the Ukrainians completely, to destroy their logistic, and basically under fire, under very heavy fire, to force the Ukrainians to retreat. But this mission, this control is impossible without additional progress in the same direction, but from the northeastern direction. Let's say from the village of Maximilianovka in the direction of the river of Sukhiye Yali. And today the pro-Ukraine mappers reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions and to take under control several tree lines between the villages and to take under control this stronghold. So let's take a look at how the map was changing during the previous several days. So this is the situation on the 7th of November, this is the situation on the 8th of November, and this is the situation by the end of the 9th of November. So from this perspective, we can see that the Russians are trying to conduct several operations. First of all, the Russians are trying to outflank Kurakhove by attacking in the direction of Dalny with the purpose to cut this direction into. And the second and the most important task of the armed force of Russian Federation is to cut this artillery pocket. You know that there are a significant number of fields, fortifications, tree lines, this one, that are still under complete Ukraine control. There are lots of Ukrainian forces. This area is under responsibilities of the 33rd Mechanized Brigade, of the 72nd, 79th, those who managed to survive during the Battle for Ugledar and so on. And now the Russians are trying to cut these positions and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. So the Russians, summarizing everything, are trying to connect the Maximilianovka itself with the Russian positions in the village of Antonovka and to take everything to the east or to the right of this red line under complete Russian control. And if the Russians are able to do this, to maintain the northeastern flank, eastern and the southern flanks, then the Ukrainians that are located between the villages of Uspienovka and Ilinka will be caught into operational encirclement or caught in cauldron, and sooner or later the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. Of course, we understand that today and during the previous few days, though these days we are receiving a lot of updates about the situation that most likely the Russians already storming the village of Uspienovka, and I believe you saw the same post, the same articles that were published by different pro-Russian resources, but yet we haven't received anything that can confirm these updates, and most likely these updates are just speculation or maybe a plan of Russian intelligence operation to make panic between the Ukrainians in this direction. As for now, we still haven't received anything that the Russians managed to enter the village of Trudovo, and we are not talking about even the village of Uspienovka itself and the company strongholds around. And I'm not sure that the Russians are going to do this. First, the Russians will try to outflank the Ukrainians and to maintain the line between Maximilianovka and the river of Sukhiye Yali. This will allow the Russians to create a perfect positions to establish complete fire control over the main Ukrainian supply roads, both from the southern and from the northern directions, which will obviously sooner or later force the Ukrainians to fall back from this artillery pocket and basically from this trap. So this is the first task, this is the main task as I understand for the Russians in the south and Donetsk direction. Now let's talk about the city of Kurakhove. Today we continue receiving updates about the Russian presence on the territory of the city itself, and today is not an exception. According to information we have, Russian army fighters were occupied almost the entire territory of the city of Kurakhove. I'll remind you just we haven't received anything that can confirm this, and we are just providing this post because it's very important information that was published by the Russians. But as for the end of the 9th of November, we have some doubts whether this information is correct or not. But anyway, the sources are saying that the Russians are already on the territory. The clashes are taking place in the vicinity of the Kurakhove citadel, and the Ukrainians are holding their positions just without purpose. The Ukrainians are trying to organize, and they're evacuating personnel from the territory of Sukhe Yale through the village of Dachne. So now it's something like the process of retreat. The Ukrainians are already retreating, but this is not very fast process. It will take time, and now the Ukrainians are fighting for Kurakhove just to save as many as possible assets, tanks, vehicles, and personnel, and to retreat in the direction of Constantinople. So let's follow this. Sooner or later we will understand everything. As for the northern direction, we continue receiving updates about the clashes on the territory of Sontsevka, but once again, the same as the story with Kurakhove, we still haven't received anything that can confirm both Russian presence or Russian attacks in this direction. Of course, different mappers have already adjusted their maps, but pro-Ukrainian mappers, neutral mappers, and reliable pro-Russian mappers haven't adjusted their maps, trying to keep the lines, let's say, as usually, without any significant progress. So it's very difficult to believe this attack, and even if the Russians manage to break through the defense and to enter the village of Sontsevka, I have some doubts whether the Russians are able to develop their offensive further in the southern direction, because the village of Sontsevka is located between two rivers. The first river is the river of Salona, and there are just two bridges in this area that connects one side with another, and the second river is the river of Strashny. This is it. So that's why even if the Russians can enter the northern part, they're going to be very difficult to cross the river and to move further in the southern direction. And most likely the Ukrainians will try to hold their lines as long as possible on the southern bank of the river, with the purpose to slow the Russians down as long as possible. So most likely the Russians sooner or later will be able to force the Ukrainians to fall back, but not today, not tomorrow, and probably not the day after tomorrow, because until this there's still a lot of job to do, a lot of things to do to maintain the line, and the most important, to maintain the line between Voznesenka and the western part of Novoselidovka. And according to information we have today, we got report that the Russian armed forces have liberated the settlement of Voznesenska. Maybe tomorrow we're going to receive additional updates and we will adjust the map then. As for the village of Ilinka Berestki, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything that can confirm the Russian progress in this direction. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the territory between Selidova and Sukurina, and as you can see we have a lot of flags, which means that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. So this is the situation by the end of the 8th of November, and this is the situation by the end of the 9th of November. As you can see, the Russians managed to take the village of Novodmitrievka under complete control. That was stated by neutral mappers, and currently the Russians are carrying out offensive operation in the direction of Zorya, the next village on the line of Russian attack. Furthermore, we have information that the Russians managed to take the 4th company stronghold between Novodmitrievka and Novoalexeyevka, which is very important, and as I understand, this is the primary task for the Russian group of forces in this direction, to take every single stronghold under control, which will allow the Russians to create a very strong base for further advance in the west, to the north, and in the southern directions. As for the city of Selidova and the western part, we can see that according to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to enter the central part, or even the most southwestern part of Petrikovka, or the village of Grigorovka. This building, these several buildings were captured by the Russians as a fast lightning attack. Now the Russians are trying to develop their positions around, to expand their positions, and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. This progress, this advance was confirmed both by pro-Ukrainian and by neutral mappers. The Russians are moving, as we discussed, along the movement and along the control, FPV drone control. We have some changes on the ground to the north of Novogrodovka. The Ukrainian sources from 225th Separate Assault Battalion Skala published the video of how they were counter-attacking and attacking the Russian edge positions between the coal mine Novogrodovka III and the city of Novogrodovka itself. And based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. In this video, we can see Ukraine attempt to counter-attack. They managed to attack Russian positions, probably to destroy some positions, but in the end, when the Ukrainians finished the cleanup operation, they retreated. The clashes were taking place exactly in this point. There is a stronghold, as I understand, which we don't have on map, and based on this video we have adjusted the territories a little bit to the south. Now we see that the Russians are trying to finish the battle for this foothold and to take under control these 3 strongholds that are currently located in this area. Now let's move further. Today we start receiving a lot of updates from the territory, from the Torietsk agglomeration. The Ukrainians published a lot of videos of how they were FPV droning the Russians, and the Russians published a significant number of videos of how they were FPV droning the Ukrainians, which means that both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, brought the significant number of forces to the line of combat contact, and the Russians are planning or about to resume their attempts to move further in the northern direction. But as I understand, and according to the disposition of icons, we can make a conclusion that the Russians are planning to attack, trying to outflank the Ukrainian positions on the territory of Mine and the Terikon from the south and the southwest, and from the east and the northeast. So the Russians will try to encircle the Ukrainians here and to force them to fall back. So most likely this is the operation we're going to see. Now let's move to the city of Chasiv Yar, and we also have a lot of icons of how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians, which means that the Russians also are about to resume their attempts to attack in the city of Chasiv Yar, and now they're trying to bring as close as possible vehicles, tanks and personnel, and the Ukrainians are trying to slow down the Russians with a significant number of FPV drone attacks. So we see that the Chasiv Yar Torietsk direction began breathing again, and most likely during the next several weeks we are going to receive a lot of updates from this territory. Most likely the Russians are about to begin the final rush. As for the Sivers direction, we haven't received anything special, just one changes on the territory of Serebyanka in Ukrainian favor. In this video we can see the counter-artillery duels. The Russians destroyed Ukrainian mortar system in the central part of the city, and based on this video we made the conclusion that Ukrainians managed to restore control over almost the entire village of Serebyanka. Maybe the Russians didn't enter the village at all. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the southern Kupiansk direction. The Russians are about to finish the battle for this territory. The Ukrainians are saying that the Russians managed to dig in deeper in the northern part, and that most likely during the next several days the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from the territory of the settlement. In this video we can see how hard the Russians are bombing and attacking on Ukrainian positions in the south, trying to force the Ukrainians to abandon their positions completely. After the fall of Terny, there are going to be just one village left. We're talking about Yampolovka, and after the fall of Yampolovka the Russians will move their focus on the village of Tarskoye, and the final battle for the Serebyanka forest will begin. As for the northern Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special, just small adjustments on map to the north of Vishnyovo that were stated by the Ukrainian mappers. This is the situation by the end of the 8th of November. This is the situation at the beginning of the 9th of November. The Russians managed to maintain the line of combat contact. As for Sudzha direction, we are waiting for additional updates, but as for now we haven't received anything that can confirm additional progress. Indeed, the Russians managed to take under control yesterday the village of Staraya Sorochna, Novaya Sorochna and Orlovka. At least that was stated by official Telegram channel of the Group of Forces North. And as for today, we have some changes on the ground in the village of Pogrivki and Marienka, made based on the photo that was published by the pro-Ukrainian sources. In this video we can see a huge Russian convoy that was moving from the village of Pogrivki in the southern direction. So most likely to answer this point, most likely the Russians first moved through the village of Pogrivki. Based on this photo, we made changes on the ground in Russian favor in the northern part. And the Ukrainians during the day carried out several counterattacks with the purpose to maintain the roads for evacuation. Currently it's very difficult to understand whether the Ukrainians managed to achieve anything or not, but anyway, let's wait what is going to be next, and we are waiting for additional updates from this territory. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.